Hello, and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders shy away from. We believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I'm your host, Jeff Ma. I'm a director at Softway, an agency based out of Houston, Texas, that specializes in digital transformation, culture, and branding. Each episode, we're diving into one element of business or strategy and testing our theory of love against it. And today, we're going to be talking about a very important and relevant topic for many businesses, probably most businesses, right now in these unprecedented times. We're talking about survival. We want to find out what's it going to take to survive in today's business climate. What does it look like to survive, and what role might love play in it? So to help answer these questions, we've invited a very special guest to the show. But before I welcome him, let me introduce some familiar faces, or should I say voices, who will be joining me in this discussion. We have Mohammed Anwar, President CEO of Softway.
Hey, Jeff.
And Chris Petrie, Vice President at Softway.
Howdy.
All right. And without further ado, our guest today is Jeff Brown. Jeff's specialty is guiding private technology companies through growth and mergers and acquisitions. He is an experienced executive, having led startups, turnarounds, and many M&A transactions. And for nearly 30 years, he's helped build resilient technology companies and advise their executives, boards, and investors. His newest venture is Navant Partners, a specialized consulting firm helping clients prepare their companies for sale by building resilience and driving growth. And most recently, he was Senior VP of Quorum Group, a leading global investment bank focused exclusively on technology mergers and acquisitions to launch. Previously, he was president of WorkSuite, a British public company subsidiary, which he restructured, led to market leadership, and then divestiture. He co-founded Intelligis, a pioneer in wireless computing, and launched Western Hemisphere operations for another British company, Simon Petroleum Technology. He was an executive at GeoQuest Systems, a venture-backed leader in petroleum software, acquired first by Raytheon and then Schlumberger. Jeff began his career as a geologist on the research faculty at Columbia University and is a published author on climate change. Jeff, welcome to the show. Did I miss anything?
Jeff, no, that sounds pretty complete. Thank you.
It's amazing.
Glad to be here. Hello, Mohammed. Hello, Chris.
Hi. Hey, Jeff.
It's going to be very confusing. I love your first name, first of all. I love it. Big fan of it, but it's going to be very confusing for this episode. But let's go with it. We have a tradition of starting with some icebreakers. I have some survival-themed icebreakers for us today to meet the show's theme. And I'll start with you, Jeff. If you were stranded on a desert island and could only bring 3 things with you, what would they be?
Oh, shoot.
What would they be? Good question. A complete collection of Bonnie Raitt's music, number 1.
Okay.
6-pack of Coors, number 2. And an umbrella, number 3.
Oh, wow.
I love it. So I already have a mental picture of that island. It's wonderful. It'll be a great hour and a half, I don't know, before you run out of.
Well, you didn't say anything about resilience or survival in that question.
That's true. That's true.
I figured I was going to get rescued at some point.
That's true.
So somebody's going to come and save him. That's always a good mindset. Like, that's always an interesting mindset.
Mohammed, what's your most impressive survival skill?
The ability to stay without food and water for many hours at a stretch, which I think could come in handy. I practice it quite a bit.
That's true. You do. Chris, what's the best way to survive a zombie apocalypse?
The best way to survive a zombie apocalypse. I think it's to, one, understand their patterns as zombies. Like, there's different types of zombies. So there are those that are nocturnal, and there are those that are, sort of day acting and night acting. So depending on what you're dealing with, you have to study your enemy. You might find that, if you think I Am Legend, right? Like, you have to have a hideout during the day and night that you can ward off any of your human scent. So you stay safe, and then during the day you go out and rummage for food. But if they are fully, active during the daytime, then you have to think about your weaponry, right? And what are the ways that you can defend yourself and still stay safe? So, I mean, that's not a clear answer, but also you didn't set me up for what the style of zombie attack or apocalypse. So,
if anyone out there is wondering, yes, this is what it's like to work with Chris. For sure. But great answer, of course, as always. So let's dive into this, Jeff. I wanted to list out, all the things that you've done, because it's really important in this conversation we have today. You have some expertise and experience, quite a bit of it, in helping guide us through this current unprecedented kind of economic climate we're in. Can you give us your perspective of what we're seeing out in the world right now?
Well, sure. Be happy to share my perspective. It's not a very optimistic perspective right now, so I'll give you some advance warning on it. But it's a difficult time, and if we're talking about businesses, especially small businesses, and we're also talking about employees, it's a really challenging time, unprecedented, as I think we all recognize. We're in the midst of a virus or healthcare-driven economic crisis, and it's creating an awful lot of stress and difficulty for individuals, for small businesses, as well as large businesses. And unfortunately, I think the impact will be with us for quite some time, and it will be quite a while before we fully recover from the kind of challenging environment we're faced with right now.
I agree.
Well, great to start off on that note. All right.
Yeah, real positive note to start out with, right?
No, but that's why we're here, right? So we wouldn't have an episode about survival if it wasn't necessary to survive right now.
Yeah, I think that's a particularly relevant business topic and culture topic right now.
Yeah, so let's talk about survival. In your perspective, Jeff, what does survival look like in that climate you just painted?
Right. Well, I think if we're in general terms, it's a resilience. It's an ability to endure, whether it's an individual. We're talking about an individual going through difficult times, a family trying to navigate difficult times, or a business trying to do the same things. It's a resilience, an ability to persevere or endure, and that requires adjustment to the surroundings, adjustment to the pressures, the external pressures we feel. The existential pressures that are now on the business or the individual or the family.
Mohammed, as a business owner, what's your take?
So obviously, these times have been very difficult for our business as well, and there are many options that, as a business owner, I could take during these crises, right? One is I could just go into cash conservation and save all of our cash assets and hunker down and wait for this pandemic and this situation to pass by before I come back up and do stuff. And that has crossed my mind. And at another angle, which is a route I'm on with the rest of you guys as part of our team, is to take on this challenge and embrace the situation and figure out ways to survive, but not only survive, but also thrive, given the opportunities that have presented itself due to the situation, because there's so much change happening and so much of our environment around us is changing. While our existing business model might not be as useful or valuable during these times, it also has afforded us the opportunity to find new avenues for our business to survive and thrive. And that's the angle that I'm counting on. That's the approach that I think our business is taking, and every other business is afforded the same opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mohammed. And I know from my seat and what we're trying to do at Softway, it's not just about like the product sales and the revenue coming in. It's also really the mental shift that as leaders you have to make first to get your business in that mode of operating, right? Because, if you think about it, you can't really go out and attack in an uncertain world if you haven't shifted into realizing that things are not going to be the same for a while, right? And so dreaming about yesterday or reminiscing about the way things used to be is not productive at this moment. And if the leader is not thinking in that vein or hasn't shifted into that thinking, they could fall victim to like the conservation and the mode of waiting it out and not really doing much because they're hoping things go back to exactly the way the way things were when we got into the mess. And I know, Jeff, you probably have some thoughts on that. Jeff Brown, to clarify who I'm talking to.
Thank you. That's helpful.
We can call you JB if you don't mind. I don't know. But you probably have some thoughts on that. But I think that shift in mindset really helps to get the goings happening around operations. But when that isn't happening, it's just a free for all from what I'm hearing in other organizations.
I do have some thoughts, Chris, and appreciate that. Certainly there are businesses that will thrive through this difficult time. They're well positioned, they're in the right markets, or they have a business model where, fortunately, the stars have aligned for them. But I think the majority of businesses will be challenged in ways that they haven't been challenged before. And that's going to, enduring the difficulties is going to require them to make some changes in the way they think about their business, their customers, their products, and embrace those changes. And as Mohammed was talking about hunkering down and conserving in order to survive through this difficulty, that's a strategy. And we all need to cut back on things through these difficult times. But as part of that assessment, I think we also need to be thinking about how do we position ourselves to begin to thrive when this is over? Because this will pass. We will get through this. This situation will pass. And businesses want to, as a result of this difficulty, take advantage of the challenge, take advantage of the need to make changes, and emerge from this a stronger, healthier business, or at least ready to become stronger and healthier as a consequence. I mean, it's a bit of I think, a crude expression, but several have said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think there's opportunity in the crisis, right?
Yeah.
You used the word resilience earlier, which kind of resonates as this critical path to move forward. Can you define what you mean by resilience in this context?
Well, I think resilience is the central concept that businesses need to be rallying around at this. Most businesses need to be rallying around at this point in time. In good times, we think about growth as the rallying point for our business and really the outcome that we're looking for from the way we run the business. But I think in these times, we should be replacing the concept of growth, with resilience, at least on the short to medium term, so that we're positioned for growth when things change. But a resilient business is, there are many attributes or many dimensions to what makes a resilient business. We can talk about revenue models, business models, customer need, customer segments, et cetera. And they all come back to being able to generate results or performance out of the choices you've made in the model you've chosen. I mean, a good example on the revenue model side is a business that is no longer project dependent, but might be dependent on recurring revenues, so that they have some predictability about the revenues that are coming in because customers have signed up for the long term rather than the short term under a recurring revenue model. On the product side, a good example might be a business that has good upsell potential once they've entered a customer account and sold something initially into the account. It's a land and expand model. So a business that has that kind of potential. Because we all know it's much more expensive to acquire that customer initially than it is to hold on to that customer once we've acquired them. And it's all about customer satisfaction, meeting their expectations and creating customer satisfaction and loyalty. And also it's about process and process efficiency. How efficiently do we operate as a business? How economically do we operate as a business? Are our process and procedures, do they yield good profitability or sustainable profitability, or is there a lot of waste in the business in the way we're running it? So those are some examples of what creates, or what the attributes of a resilient business are.
So Jeff, you mentioned quite a few examples around process and procedures and market strategy, client strategy, and so forth. So can you help me talk more about your team and the employees of the organization who are also going through this economic stress personally in their lives, and where as a business, how can we get everyone on the team and the company to become resilient as well?
You're teeing up the culture discussion, aren't you, Mohammed?
That's what it sounds like to me, and I'm glad you called him on it. That's a great catch.
Yeah,
great catch.
Well, and it's the culture is absolutely essential, right? So, culture is the behavior of the organization, and it affects so much of the organization. To use another cliche, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? If the organization and the people in the organization aren't of the right frame of mind, if they don't exhibit the right behaviors and the right attitudes, the business is going to have a hard time pivoting, transforming, even enduring under stresses like we're feeling right now. And so that culture, that whole element of culture, really is the foundation of growth in a strong environment, but even more so resilience in a challenging environment like we have right now, challenging economy like we have right now.
So how does a company go about building that resilience then? Do you have any insights onto that, or any first steps?
Well, I'll start by putting the pressure on Mohammed and Chris.
That's a great strategy. That is a great strategy, Jeff Brown.
Because because the behaviors, and this is why, the behaviors start by those that are modeled by the leaders of the organization. If the leaders aren't modeling the behaviors and the attitudes that the organization needs to embrace, then it's really difficult to permeate those behaviors and attitudes down through the organization. So it does start with leadership, right?
Yep.
And the leadership behavior. So I'll stop there and give Chris and Mohammed a chance to comment before I go on.
Yeah. No, thank you. The first thing for my end, from looking at it sort of personally, as I mentioned before, the mindset first, like getting your mind into the place of, okay, this is a new environment and there's uncertainties, right? And I can try and predict all day long about what could happen, when the markets will return, et cetera, but that's actually a waste of time. And so taking from that sort of standpoint, it becomes about really embracing risk. Because at this point, as a small business or a medium-sized business, you don't have anything to lose, right? Like all you have is the ability to try out new things. And so, we've tried to implement and really test a culture of experimentation, where when our team see leaders willing to experiment and try new things, and that doesn't just mean new products, that means new ways of working, new ways of communicating, new ways of collaborating, new ways of organizing calendar, like all of those things are on the table. Like nothing is too sacred to test out or try or scrap, right? And having everyone see that approach and see leaders embrace that wholeheartedly, it removes that fear of punishment if something doesn't go according to a quote unquote plan, or doesn't happen according to expectation, but it does open up the learnings. You get the chance to see if there's a new way to work, earn revenue, or even, produce said deliverables or products. And so for me, that's been the biggest learning, is that the way I used to operate is not necessarily going to help me out in this case. So, what got me So before COVID, it's not going to get me through COVID, right? So how do we, as leaders, help everyone understand that risk taking and being okay with not meeting maybe the outcome initially, but learning all along the way and using those learnings to catapult the next initiative that much more, is one of the easiest things to try, because it doesn't require you to be an expert at anything but curiosity.
I would also add that resilience from a standpoint of leadership to help influence the whole organization is being able to showcase to the rest of the team how you can fail and still pick yourself back up and move forward and take it as a learning. And so similarly, instead of demonstrating, punishment or remorse for making a mistake or failing at trying things, instead, if us as leaders, we can encourage learnings from the failure and quickly move on to trying other things and knowing what you learned from that failure and know what not to try and what to try. I think demonstrating that by example, us as leaders, we can encourage that resilience and that mindset and the attitude to not give up and keep trying. And I do agree with Jeff that I know it starts with the leaders, and that's a lot of pressure. I can tell you that's a lot of weight on the shoulder of a leader to be able to lead and guide their team through these crises and show the resilience and demonstrate the toughness. But I also think at the same time, being able to be vulnerable and being transparent and showcasing to the rest of your org that you are human just like them, and you can make mistakes as well, and you can have bad days and be anxious from moment to moment, but also demonstrate how you overcome those feelings as a human and become resilient is key to try and help the whole organization follow your lead.
Yeah.
I always had the sense that, I've always believed that humans by nature are resilient. As humans, we are just built to be resilient. That's how we evolved and got to where we are today. But it's almost like that's the problem when we're trying to build this culture, is that we don't always see each other as humans, especially our leaders. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you see a leader up top as just this pinnacle, sitting in a chair and commanding, you don't see them as a human. It's really hard to, I think, buy into a culture of resilience when you don't first see that you're being led by a resilient human first. That's a perspective that I'm seeing in this environment.
Yeah. For me, it gets back to a fundamental comfort level. Chris talked about taking risk. Muhammad talked about excelling. To me, it comes back to a fundamental comfort level with change, the willingness to change. We all get pretty comfortable when things fall into a predictable pattern. And I agree with you, Jeff. As humans, we're more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. And this sort of resilience requires that we all get comfortable with change and experimentation as well, because not all change is going to work out as we anticipated. And it's recognizing that, some failures are acceptable so long as we learn from the failures. But it takes a collaborative model too, to consider change, implement change, and embrace the results of change as well. And it takes that trust in one another also, that vulnerability that Muhammad was talking about.
And Jeff Brown, I'm curious, you've been within a lot of companies, but you've also consulted with a lot of companies. Have you seen examples, positive or negative, of how resilience was or was not a part of culture, and how that played out when it came to business outcomes or acquisition or mergers? And, not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot, would love to learn and see if there's some good use cases and scenarios out there that our listeners can learn from.
Yeah, well, you warned me you were going to put me on the spot at some point in this.
I did, but
I'll speak from personal experience here. I was part of a company at one point in my career in an operating role. I was running a portion of the global footprint of the business, And the business at the top was run by engineers. And we, in our part of the business, were much more entrepreneurially oriented. And you see this dichotomy in a lot of businesses where you have individuals who have more of an accounting or engineering mindset, trying to work closely with those who have a much more entrepreneurial or nimble, results-oriented mindset. Not that we all aren't focused on generating results, but we were also separated by an ocean. And so communication wasn't what it needed to be. It was really hard to get face to face with one another. Mm-hmm. And the situation just conspired against us. And we just never were able to pull it together and get on the same page as well as and work as efficiently together as we would have liked. And it created a very difficult situation. And the organization struggled through this, never really made it through this, and never really reached its performance potential as a consequence, which is a shame because it had a product that was ahead of its time, required some attitude change on behalf of the customers to embrace it, the early adopters, if you will, innovators to embrace the product. But it had tremendous potential. It was a terrific product, but we just never were able to take advantage of the opportunity because of the culture. Culture got in the way. Cultural differences got in the way, behavioral differences, approach to management, communicating, hierarchy got in the way of collaboration.
Yep. I've lived in a company that had a very similar challenge, and it's not fun when you're not in any leadership position, but you're watching sort of the leaders fight against each other and not want to collaborate, and you are trying to make things happen, and you need everybody to be on the same page. And you're constantly just every day is a battle internally to the place where you have no more energy to focus on even your competitors. That was not a fun environment when I was in it.
Most of my career has been in small businesses, mm-hmm. Small entrepreneurial businesses, or working with entrepreneurial leaders as they work hard to grow their businesses. This stuff is hard. This stuff is not easy, and it's not for the faint of heart. And there's just absolutely no reason to make it more difficult than it needs to be, right? Mm-hmm. Building product, recruiting customers, and keeping them happy is hard. Yeah. There's no reason why working together should be hard as well. Yeah. And it's, collaboration shouldn't be a difficult issue, shouldn't be getting in our ways.
Yeah. And I know that when it comes to tying that back to resilience, when you're faced with an economic calamity or a situation that's out of your control, and it's that much harder to communicate, collaborate, or get together to figure things out, I really don't know what survival looks like, to be honest. I don't know how resilience is even a conversation to embark upon if you can't even just talk about everyday things.
Right. Well, I think you guys are doing a great job of creating a resilient organization. The way you have approached the whole business, as I call it, business to employee model, focus on the employee, making sure employees are happy, productive, safe in this environment, is so important to establishing the kind of culture that you need to create to survive and thrive in this sort of environment.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Flattery will get you nowhere, Jeff.
It'll get you everywhere with me. Forget Ma and Anwar.
Will it get me an interview on your podcast?
It's like my love can be bought for everybody listening. I'm not kidding, but I am kidding.
Go ahead, Mo.
Jeff. Yeah, sure. So Jeff Brown, what are some of the things that you've been implementing in your personal life and your business to demonstrate resilience during these tough times?
Ooh, you didn't warn me about this question, Muhammad.
Surprise.
But it's a fair question. Number one, I think, is choosing an area to work, choosing a consulting domain, an advisor domain that I have a passion for, rather than I do because I need to make a living. So having a real enthusiasm about what I do is important. And once again, I'm running a small advisory practice right now, so that's part of it. But I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy the M&A work. I enjoy the advisory work, number one. Number two, it's choosing people to work with, customers to work with, who I enjoy working with, so that, you know, there is joy and satisfaction that comes from those relationships. Choosing to work with customers who have, who are coachable, who take advice, take guidance, who collaborate and communicate well. Very importantly, though, it's choosing customers who have strong business models and who, in my opinion, are likely to survive, who have resilience, an attitude of resilience, an attitude of adjustment, who are likely to survive. You know, at the end of the day, a big part of this is putting food on the table for our families, right? So working with customers that have little hope of surviving is probably not a good business strategy and doesn't create a resilient business. And working with clients who are really truly committed to their business and building a resilient, stronger business, because they're going to put in the work and the effort. And it's building those relationships with them. And it comes back to relationships, right? Building those relationships that will endure. Every relationship's going to have a rocky part of it, rocky period, or difficulties. We won't always see eye to eye on things, but building a relationship that will endure, a resilient relationship with those clients as well. Some of the things I look for as I build my business.
Very good. Thank you for sharing.
So we mentioned the role of a leader in all of this, and we opened with how critical that was in terms of just flat out, how do you build resilience? It comes from the leader. So if I'm a leader trying to embrace this concept and make a change, what am I looking at? What do I need to be changing and looking at today for the listeners here? And this is to anybody. We got a lot of leaders here.
Yeah.
I'm going to let Jeff Brown go first.
I agree.
Well, I think we need to start a new podcast then if we're going to try and answer that question. There's an awful lot, I think, to the answer to that question. It starts with a close examination of the business model. It's a top to bottom assessment of the business. What are we building? What problem are we solving? What customers are we addressing? How strong is the need that those customers feel for what we offer? Can we be sustainable and differentiated in the marketplace with what we're offering? Right? So we stand out from amongst the other alternatives our customer may have to solve that problem? Are we really bringing value to the customer in the way we solve the problem that's sustainable as well, enduring value for the customer? Can we do this on a repeatable basis, a scalable basis? So if we do it once, can we do it 2 times, 3 times, 10 times, and do it efficiently and profitably over and over again? Those are some of the things. And can we do it while we're keeping our employees happy, motivated, growing as well in the organization? One of the biggest challenges we have is employee turnover. It is so expensive, and there's a lot of hidden cost in employee turnover. The cost of recruiting an employee, training an employee, and getting them up to speed is significant. It's very high. And if you couple that with the downtime that you have because a prior employee has left for whatever reason, so you have a gap in productivity that you have to fill, that you've lost, and then you have to find somebody and bring them up to speed in the organization, all very expensive propositions. So that employee retention, employee satisfaction is a very big part of building a resilient business.
Mo, earlier you had mentioned that, we're talking about leaders and you talking about your own context, but we talked about how you said how you have to start, walking the talk and basically demonstrating these growth mindsets, essentially, right? You have to start showing that you're resilient. I get the feeling that like even when uppermost leaders might be demonstrating it, there's still people in the ranks that are just waiting for this to pass or expecting things to go back to normal or to some sort of normal, right? I feel like demonstrating it's one thing and an important part of it. Like if you're not doing that, then you're going to miss the mark. But what else can we be doing to generate this culture that folds everybody into resilience? Because this is my opinion, I guess, but my perspective is that there are a number of people who will see you be resilient, but they're either so far removed or not yet bought in enough, and they're still just kind of taking their paycheck and waiting for resilience to benefit them.
Right.
What do we do about that?
So I think the answer lies in practicing empathy and empathetic form of leadership. And during these times, I think it's important to have care and compassion for your team members and employees, given the circumstances that we're all put into and the predicaments that come with it. But we have to also make sure that we are able to hold our teams accountable. Yes, times are tough. Things are going the way that they're going, and we all have a lot of different problems we're facing in our personal lives, work lives because of this pandemic. But I think as a leader, besides just walking the talk, we also have to be able to hold our team members accountable. And that starts with empathy. Doesn't mean I don't hold them accountable because I'm compassionate and care for them, but it means as a leader, how am I going to have the necessary conversations with their team to make them understand how to overcome these situations? How do you help them navigate around these crises? Even in their personal lives, if they're going through stuff, how can I step in and help them? And how can I guide them and coach them to deal with their personal situation and still get them to achieve the outcomes that are needed from them for our business? And having those crucial conversations and not shying away from it and talking about the realities that we are up against is one way to start building resilience in your team. And it's not through fear, but it's rather through giving that hope and confidence and showing them that you care and you're there to support them and you want the best for them. And by demonstrating that, you are able to encourage, motivate your team to have that resilience to get through these crises. And that's something that I firmly believe in, and I am trying very hard to practice it. I sometimes call that kind of relationship with my team as tough love, because I love my team, but at the same time, I'm going to have those tough love conversations and make them realize that we got to pick ourselves up and we got to move on. We got to fight the situation. Sure, we may have failed here. Sure, we may have made mistakes here, but we can't let that keep us back. We got to get up and keep fighting. And here's how I can show you, I can help you. Here's what you need to do. And have those tough conversations with your team to make them realize what we're here to do and how we can collectively overcome these crises. And so having those type of crucial conversations, leading with example, being transparent, not withholding information, talking about things how it is in a responsible way, but also guiding your team to be resilient is something that leaders have to be ready to do.
Yep. And I think the only thing that I would add to that is a lesson that I learned from my sister actually just yesterday, which is during these times, not everybody's going to click in and get everything 100%. Even if you've been talking and giving them examples and, explaining everything 100% to the best of their ability, people are just not all going to, are going to be quick on the uptake. And so as a leader, instead of reacting negatively when they actually click in and start understanding things and start applying the mindset or the approach or the ideas that you've been trying to get them leaned into, encourage that. Like, let people click in when they click in, because that energy that they have now can actually fuel a lot more productivity, engagement, and ideas and innovation, rather than more or less punishing them or complaining that they took this long to get into the program. And so practicing, that's still part of empathy, but it's more being aware as a leader when you feel like, well, I've been fighting all this time and you guys are just now realizing we need to start fighting. Like, what's going on? Like, I've been, trying to fight, 10 different battles with everybody just watching me. And instead of like reacting to the team, encouraging that, recent, revelation or epiphany that people have had, and encourage them to like, okay, now that you get it, now that you're clicked in, now you go own it, you go drive it, right? Like, you got it. And being that support system and that, that motivator to keep people into that frame of mind that they may have just clicked into. And I think that in times like these, it's very easy for leaders to get irritated with teams that are slower on the uptake, or who we feel like are not listening, and they hear it from some outside perspective, and all of a sudden, they've been enlightened and everything makes sense. And you're like, I've been saying this to you for 3 weeks. Okay. So that's been a recent learning of mine that I think is just a part of that resilience play, which is it's very easy for everyone to be hyper emotional, including the leader. In times where you're trying to survive and trying to push a company to stay in survival mode. So I would just encourage all the listeners out there to just be mindful of the fact that everyone's sort of uptake is slower, and at different paces. And you're going to have some people that get it right away and are ready to run. You're going to have some people that want to see other people running before they get up and run. And you're going to have some people that, are going to watch the entire race until they see that, like, oh, my team really needs me now. I need to get off the bleachers and go, carry the baton, right? And that's okay. It's just you have to know that not everybody's moving at your pace as a leader sometimes.
Great. So I want to kind of tie this back to love, of course, and I know that there's a lot of strategic and tactical places to understand this. And Jeff, I'd love for you to expound on some of those connections, because I'd love to know, like, we're always out to prove, what does love have to do with any of this? And I think this is a great place to really sit and talk about that a little bit, because there are a lot of tactical business decisions that have to be made to survive. What's your take on where love fits in this equation specifically?
Wow. I haven't quite clicked in yet, Chris. Can I have a little bit more time?
And that's okay, Jeff. We all have different paces. It's okay.
Love is, I think it's the underpinning of the kind of culture that we're trying to create here. Love, I think, is the word that we're using here to capture and describe the kind of productive, coachable, empathetic, productive culture that we're trying to create. And so, I tend to think in more hard terms than soft terms. And I look at outcomes. And the outcome of a loving business culture is one that is a business that is fulfilling its mission. The mission it set out to fulfill, while adhering to its core values at the same time. Right? It hasn't given up its value set in the process of fulfilling its mission, and that takes a certain foundation of love, if you will, collaboration, teamwork. I think they're all shades of the same color, if you will, when we're talking about what drives a business forward. You need that human element that collaborates and works well together in order to get anything done. And love is that strategy that optimizes that collaboration.
So for me, Jeff, I think my lesson in resilience and love comes from a football game that I was physically present to watch back in 2015. I was able to watch a football game between University of Houston and play University of Memphis Tigers, and they both were ranked. and it was supposed to be the 10th game of the season for Houston, and they were undefeated. This is a lot on the line for the team. And going into the fourth quarter of the football game, the Houston Cougars were trailing by over 20 points and had their third-string quarterback out on the field because their first-string quarterback and the second-string quarterback got injured. And there was literally, from a statistical standpoint, ESPN was predicting we had 0.01 chance of winning that night. And I ended up watching the University of Houston Cougars come back and win that match that night. They came back with less than 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter and won by 1 point against the 21-ranked University of Memphis team. And what I learned from that football game after 2 days, when I tuned in to watch Coach Tom Herman speak about that victory, when he was probed by the reporters as to how their team was so resilient and how did they end up winning that match that night, what was going on, Coach Tom Herman attributed all of that to the love that the teammates had for each other, the culture of love that sports team was following and embracing. And he said that every single football team member out there wasn't fighting for themselves. They were fighting for the brother who they love on the field. They were on that field to support one another, and they were fighting till the last second for each other. And that taught me a very important lesson in resilience, that resilient teams, whether they're in sports or inside of an organization like our company, when you care for each other to that extent, then you are now becoming resilient for the sake of those that you care for and love. And so in a crisis like this, I see the culture of love and support for one another can help build those resilient organizations to achieve those outcomes that the business needs. And you're not just doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for each other, and you're willing to fight for each other. And so that's where I see the parallel and the benefit of having a culture of love inside of a company, where you care so much for one another that you don't want to see this go away. You don't want to quit. You don't want to give up or see this crisis or this situation, keep you from winning. And it drives you even more to keep fighting for each other.
That's a great point. I think I'm thinking about myself right now, and I think there's something to be said about in this COVID specific crisis, right? Nobody's prepared, and it's kind of like nobody knows what they're doing a lot of the times. It's like we're all doing brand new things, and when this crisis first hit, I made this mental assumption that I'd be just busy working to climb out of this. But as we've played it out, I've actually found that a lot of my time is actually spent connecting and coaching and connecting to people and working, but also mainly because it feels like without that, we're not able to do these new things and step into these really scary places without each other right now. And trying to imagine this entire ordeal with the old mindset of a secure and stable, unchanging world or environment is just impossible for me to imagine right now. And trying to imagine, without the culture that I feel we've built well surrounding me, I just see all these efforts and initiatives and changes that we need to make falling very flat, because I would be scared to bring forth my potentially terrible idea or product and I would be possibly critical of others in the same way, without this relationship that we have that kind of forges the trust that I'm like, hey, I know you're going through it, I'm going through it, we're both in it together, we feel that connection, bring your best, I'll I got your back kind of feeling is so important to me right now. So you saying that helped kind of trigger that thought for me that's where culture really feels necessary, not just beneficial to being resilient right now.
Agreed.
Well stated.
So survival. So we're saying survival is about resilience. Resilience is formed through culture, and culture is developed through love by our definition, right?
Mhm.
Did I miss anything?
Yep.
No?
I think that works.
Yep.
Sorry, Chris, did you have anything to add on that?
I think everyone summed it up so beautifully that I would ruin it if I contributed anything. I know people like the sound of my voice, but I will have to refrain and let the words of Muhammad and Jeff Brown and even you, Jeff Ma,
Oh, even me. Thank you.
conclude us. I think it's like, I mean,
I just wanted to be
Michelle
inclusive.
go.
I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah, no, I appreciate that, but Michelle doesn't close after Beyonce. Like, so I feel like Beyonce's already closed this show. So,
Well, I asked for that. Beyonce reference. I opened the door.
You did.
And you
You
walked
did.
through
I
it.
think everyone wanted it too.
Well, with that, I want to first end by saying Jeff Brown. I am Jeff, but I will make sure everyone knows I'm talking to Jeff Brown. Thank you so much for being here. You know, your expertise and your perspective on this matter is not only beneficial to our audience, but you're helping Softway through some tough times as well. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us today.
Well, Jeff Ma, I appreciate that. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed working with you guys as well. You guys are a tremendous group to work with, and it's wonderful when you can work with a team who you feel you can have an impact working with. And so you guys have created a very exciting culture at Softway, and so you need to feel good about that, and I think it'll serve you well in the future, very well as you go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. So we post new episodes of Love as a Business Strategy every Tuesday. And if there's a business topic you'd like us to cover, some feedback you'd like to give us, comments, questions, anything, find us at softway.com/labs. That's LAABS. And if you like what you heard today, please do leave us a review or subscribe on Apple. That would mean a lot. And we will see you all next week. Thank you, Muhammad and Chris, for joining us as well.
Thank you,
you.
Jeff. Thank
All
you,
right.
Jeff.
Bye. Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Jeff.
you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Jeff.